So rather than somebody actually building and designing all this, you can just literally describe what you want and then have it come to life.
Welcome to the Generation AI podcast, where we demystify artificial intelligence for higher education and beyond. I'm your co-host, JC Bonilla.
And I'm Ardis Kadiu.
How you doing, my friend?
Doing great. It was good seeing you for the past couple of days in person.
We had an intense 3-4 days in your Raleigh headquarters. And yes, it was great. It's great to be with the entire team, you and the board, and all the exciting things are happening on Elements of always fun, right?
That's right. Is that why you're so tired? It's like you just left all the energy here.
Artists and friends, all I can tell you is there's business meals and the socializing, the drinking. When you do it with the Kadiu's, right, like 3 or 4 nights in a row, your body is like, okay, it's hard to keep up with you. It's an incredible experience. It's really the best. You guys are you're probably one of the best hosts, and at this point, I just need like light food and sleep, my friend.
I hear you. Same here.
Thank you.
What do we got going on for today?
Well, look, we are bringing an episode that it's contemporary to one of the shifts that we're seeing induced by AI in one of our professions, right? Software development. Vibe coding is this idea that we've spoken about here, that a student, a teacher, anybody can really do a drop of software and application in a matter of seconds, minutes, without the need of a keyboard. In this sense, it's a speaking approach to drive code development. And what we wanted to have a conversation is, how is this taking place? What really is it? Demonstrate some of these capabilities, and in our style, Artists demystify this whole beautiful thing of vibe coding. So that's what we have planned for today. Are you excited about it?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic for sure, because what's ended up happening over the past few months is, or actually not few months, maybe more like a month and a half, or February, this notion of folks building, like you mentioned, real applications, and the coding agents is getting so good. It's becoming mainstream. Vibe coding, it's becoming mainstream, and we wanted to have an episode so everybody can kind of understand what it is, and kind of where it came from, and kind of what it means for software development, but also what it means for anybody who's kind of building any kind of application from prototyping. So
let's just jump right into it. Let's start defining it and remind everybody, what is it? Where does it come from? So this February, Andrew Karpathy makes a drop, and I believe it's a thread, also a tweet, right, in which he describes this new style of programming by the sense of, by the notion of reading the prompts, right? The whole workflow that is presented is this idea that a prompt generates the code, you accept it, you run, and then you iterate. And this idea of the vibe of going through these stages, it's basically what it's all about. So in other words, vibe coding is a paradigm where a software developer goes away from conventional, code to a conversation using high-level natural language, hands and the way you and I communicate, to instruct the AI or LLM on what he or she is expecting. The code gets generated, and that iterative process, it's basically what vibe coding is all about.
So, the idea of vibe, where vibe means that the essence, you describe what you want the output to be by vibing. That's the notion here, and that's what vibe stands for. You're basically describing what you want the output, and then you guide the process along this. If you've built any software, it is very precise. So you're writing code, you're building classes, you're building functions, you're building all of these different things, and then you're committing that stuff. And if there's any bugs, you're going through and iterating and figuring out where the bugs are, and you're looking at commits, and you're looking at diffs in terms of like what code has changed, and so on and so forth. Well, the vibe coding is essentially now, rather than you looking at all that stuff, you just let the AI or the LLM figure that stuff out. So instead of just changing incremental components of your code, the AI is essentially rewriting the whole thing. It becomes really, really interesting when you think about it, right? And that's where the vibe component comes in, or that's the naming convention. So it was interesting that Karpathy put that tweet on February, and then since then we've kind of seen a lot of folks start using these tools to kind of build more and more, just by describing what the output is, and they don't care. It's like I don't know what if there's a bug. I don't care if there's a bug. I'm just going to tell it try it again or fix it, and change something, and then the whole thing is being rewritten.
One of the important things to distinguish between the Vibe code in the approach to develop, code through verbal prompts versus a AI code assistant, right? We've been seeing a ton of coding that gets better and faster through generative AI. But this is different, right? Because in the past, I put in my Python hat and I would say, give me this, right? But there is the programming, the programmer, the data structures, like all that training, it gets turned on, and I'm articulating that in a prompt. This is different. This kind of creative prompt of, I want to build a website, and the website needs to give me the opportunity to interact with customers. By the way, my customers are going to be moms, and I'm going to trade in Bitcoin. That type of prompt, creative in a way, big scale, it's the type of input that makes Vive coding a Vive, and very, very real, right? Now, you probably experimented with a little bit of these tools. So let's do a repertoire. Which tools are here, right? So you introduced me to Lovable. Team is using a few things. So can we just do a recap of what tools are there, and kind of like the ecosystems in which Vive coding is being deployed?
Yeah, we can definitely go to the tools, just so we can reiterate one more time in terms of how it works, like the whole flow, and we'll mention the tools as part of that. So you mentioned the developer or anybody actually. So this reminds me of a Ratatouille where it says, the chef is like anybody can cook, kind of everybody gets inspired to cook. Well, in this case, it's like anybody can build products, or anybody can develop, and anybody can be a programmer, which is really, really cool. But a developer, somebody really just puts a prompt, like you mentioned, like create a website. You can describe the more you can describe it, the better. So you create a website with a login page, dark mode, or whatever, and you essentially put that into your AI tool. And then that generates code in whatever language you can describe the language, or you'll pick the right language for whatever the task is. If you're building a website, most likely it's going to be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and so on and so forth. And the tools that you're using, that you were mentioning right now, are tools like you mentioned Lovable, which is a website. We're going to use Lovable a little bit later to just go through an example and a couple of things that we've been building. So Lovable is one of those, but then Cursor actually is the tool that Karpathy was using to go back and forth and try this agentic way of building. We use Cursor here at Element as well. Our development team has been using Cursor now, for a little bit. We actually migrated from GitHub Copilot. So we migrated from that to Cursor, and the team has been using that. There's also Replit and Anthropic's Claude artifacts or code right now as well, which got introduced last week. There's also OpenAI's ChatGPT coding as well. So there's a whole Bolt.new, which is another one. There's a whole lot of them, of these environments. And essentially what they do, they provide you a sandbox environment. You can test and refine the outputs instantly. And the code runs in those environments. You tell it what you want. They provide you with an environment, depending on which one it is. And then it supports this iterative refinement, right? So a user or that developer can ask and can tweak that prompt when it produces something. You can say, add a search bar, for example, in order to modify the code, and you don't touch any of the underlying syntax at all. That's the whole idea here. it really supports this iterative refinements, right? So you can go back and forth, like we said, but it doesn't. You don't have to stop there, right? So you can integrate a lot of different capabilities to it just by adding more and more and telling the AI, add this, add that, modify this, modify that, and the tools are getting even better now, where you can make very specific changes to this piece of functionality. So that's how it works. And going back to the tools, like I mentioned, Cursor is probably one of the most popular code editors right now, or coding assistants, or however you want to call it, and the AI powered coding IDE.
Environments. Yeah.
Exactly. And it enables one thing that makes it really interesting is that it's local to your computer. It connects with whatever model that you can specify, and it enables multi-file projects, right? So it generates multi-file projects, and it can work on really large code bases as well. The guys at Cursor, they do some really interesting things. They're really, really young, JC. Like they got out of school, and it's the company that's grown one of the fastest companies. I believe they are at 300 million in revenue already. So it's crazy, right? It's like when you start thinking about it, they went from 100 just a couple of months ago to last month it was 200, and now they're 300, one of the fastest growing companies. So that's the IDE. Another one is Replit, and Replit was a, similar, but they provide and they host this application. So Cursor is local to your computer, to your machine, and that's why it's getting used by product companies, because it doesn't require you to use a website or anything like that. It essentially works on your already code bases that you have. Replit, it's a little bit different. It's more of a platform that you deploy your applications to, and now it has built kind of a text to code, or an interface that can allow you to do that.
A kind of beginner friendly approach to coding, right? It has that signature. Yeah.
Exactly. Some of the lighter weight versions that we already had before, where we probably have introduced that to our friends here on the podcast, was Claude Artifacts, which was one of the original. Essentially, you can ask it to build certain applications, and it'll go ahead and do that. ChatGPT has the same thing. It has actually an interpreter in the browser, or it runs an interpreter that runs your code, and you can actually see the output of it. So the LLMs are really good about that.
And it's important to know that in the frontier labs, right, Claude has, Anthropic is the preferred frontier model in lab for programmers, right? And they're really they seem to be doing much better in grabbing that market share relative to OpenAI's and Gemini's and whatnot. So it's a really interesting play that you can see, and there was a lot of data of how their funding rounds, Ardis, was all around this manifestation of AI for coding, to the point that their CEO, I don't know if you remember that claim that 90% of the code, it's going to be done by machines, by AI. And I forgot the stat, but it was in the next 2-3 years, but it was one of those gigantically aspirational and visionary claims from Anthropic. But yeah.
Right, exactly. So I mean, the progression here has been, the models are getting really, really good, and we went from single file code editing. They were producing single file, and that was the code, the Anthropic. So it was able to write really good code. Those are the artifacts. But over time, we now have moved to tools that are building multi-file, and that's where the vibing becomes really, really interesting. So we've progressed now to full applications, and Cursor is really one of those tools. One of the other tools that is really interesting is also called Windsurf. It used to be called Codium, but now it's Windsurf, and they're another competitor to Cursor. We have not used it or try to use it, but Windsurf is they're also picking up a great speed right now. So that's kind of where we are in terms of the tools, and what makes this all possible is this model's getting better and better, like you said, and Sonnet 3.7 is one of the favorite in code generation. Google Gemini 2.5 is also really, really good. And lately, L3 has become one of the favorites in terms of generating code as part of this.
All of them are great, and we're gonna come back to tools and have the opportunity for you to see it, and we're gonna vibe code here live in front of you guys. The ecosystem is also building artists, so we started to see as the phenomena and people are talking about it, and companies and tools that are around it. The supplementaries on education, right, is coming along. So many computer science courses, MIT's kind of foundational CS courses already introduced in the curriculum. Andrew Yang, one of the most famous data scientists and machine learning educators, already dropped its 94-minute Vibe Coding 101, right? We also start seeing it across industry standards. Element, and in many, many more other companies, startups, and fully developed startups are bringing the practice, right, centered around rapid prototyping.
Well, actually, I wanna make sure that so the startups themselves, they're not necessarily vibe coding. Actually, there has been a lot of individuals who are building stuff and they're vibe coding and putting stuff out as products, which is really interesting. We should actually take a look at that as well. But actual the companies are using some of the same tools, but they're actually building bigger software, right? They're incorporating coding tools into their real workflows.
Using more the code, like LLMs as coding assistants, opposed to vibe coding,
Correct.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
And yeah, so it's been exciting to see that that parallel and kind of how the methodology and the practice is being adopted. So it's very unique. It's different. It's low risk and kind of low. It's easy to access, right? It contrasts many of the low code platforms by basically offering a different way to have these creative prompts. Aligns really well, artists, with these many things that you and I have been talking about in the introduction of how AI removes the friction in creative marketing in many other sectors. This is basically the take of AI as a co-creator, but how it touches on software, in my opinion, right? And artists, before we go to tools, like real, you're a programmer, right? And you've been doing, not a programmer, you've been running DevOps teams for a long time. Element at its core, right, is a product. So how are you feeling that as a software leader, right? So I want to speak to Ardis, not the CEO, but the software person. How is this being adopted? Are you feeling our engineers?
Are you asking if we're vibe coding our products? And the answer is no, we're not vibe coding our products, JC.
I just want to know, how is this, or we're talking about vibe coding, and how is this landing in an engineering shop, right? Like us, Element.
Yeah, vibe code. I mean, so prototyping is amazing. So it's able to prototype. So now rather than you going into a full design component, like going into Figma and starting to design everything, you can actually just draw some sketches, and then you can use some of those sketches to essentially tell the AI, "Hey, I would like to build this thing." So you can describe it, and you can build prototypes very, very fast. You can build interactions. So the prototyping part on products becomes really possible right now. And that's one area that I wanted to show you really quickly. Like you can build a landing page. So those are really, really good. But we haven't gone to building full products with just vibe coding, right? Just telling you what to do. We're not quite there yet. There's a lot of security implications with vibe coding. So if somebody doesn't know what they're doing, or they are building something that is full of bugs, and it's also very insecure, right? So the LLM doesn't necessarily know the best practices sometimes, and when you're going through this many iterations, things break, and you're building software that is not secure. However, this is an opportunity for some of these platforms to essentially come in and build tools on top of that, so they can scan your code and now do security audits and so on and so forth. But here at Element, we are not necessarily using like the full vibe code. We're not vibe coding our products just yet, but we are going to get there, JC. I think this is inevitable in terms of how good some of these tools are becoming. For example, Cursor has evolved, and they're developing stuff very, very quickly, where they're understanding larger and larger code bases, and that's become really important. So now you can use those tools, including some of the recent tools from Anthropic or Anthropic Code or Claude Code, and also the OpenAI code as well, or Codex. I think it's Codex. So essentially, they're showcasing their LLMs, but they are building these tools that can use the full project context, right? Because the models are getting really, really big context windows, and now you can fit more and more of that stuff in there. And companies like Cursor, they're becoming really good at understanding your whole code, understanding and getting context externally. So it becomes very fast and easy to build stuff. I do actually have to say, one of the examples that we used internally, we're building some integrations, let's say, with some
SISs and
right, right. So we're building integrations with like an LMS. And rather than the developer actually understanding the API inside and out, we went through and said, hey, let's just, here's some scaffolding that we put together. Here's kind of what we want. And then, why don't you use the example that we've already built, but now apply to this other LMS and can you build that integration? And it went ahead and created all different classes. It understood, it knew what the API of that LMS looked like, because it went out and we gave it the context of the documentation. It understood, it built everything, it renamed, it modeled everything after the already built feature that was there. And it kind of saved quite a bit of time, right? But that was the first example, I believe, last month, or maybe over a month and a half ago, that I was working with the developer, and we saw some real multi-file projects being built really, really quickly.
that's incredible. Should we just jump into what does it look like and do a bit of a live demo here? You want to move to that section, Ardis?
Yeah, let's do that. So let's use Lovable. I think that's probably one of the nicest tools right now, and the more complete as well. They went through a redesign, so they dropped Lovable 2.0. I believe it was last week. So I have two things in here. Actually, I have three things in here. One of them that I built about 2 months ago with Lovable 1, it was this notion of, I wanted to explain the power of compound improvements here at Element. All right, thinking about, okay, if you get 1% better every single day, like, well, what does it mean? Like, how much better can we get as an organization, or if we improve certain metrics? So the growth factor. And what I did is I asked Lovable to essentially build me an app that showcases the power of compounding effect. I want to illustrate this core concept of progress before perfection at Element. I want to illustrate how, if you make things 1% better each week, the results at the end of the year is really large. Build an interactive app that showcases this. That's all I told it.
That's your input. You're not defining. I need you to do this in Python. I need to have a UX. Like, you're literally allowing the technology to make those architecture decisions.
Exactly. And this was in March 16th. So about 2 months ago, a month and a half ago. And it went ahead and built me a I would say pretty amazing page, and it's very interactive, where it's dashboard like style, with all of the hover effects and all the dashboarding. You can kind of take a look, and it models everything. Everything is kind of connected together, where you can define the weekly improvements. It actually went ahead and not just build the kind of this dashboard, but it also built it thought about and build kind of this time period, right? It understood that, hey, I might want to explore how to change timing in here, and then provided even more kind of key insights as part of that. So this was a very, very simple prompt, and with just one shot, it was able to build this really nice use case.
What do we know about what this is behind the scenes? Is this seems to me that it's going to be some type of HTML project that you can host as a website, right?
The nice thing about Lovable is that you actually can publish the projects on their servers. So if I click this publish button here, it gives me a domain and I can publish it. And then I can also provide my own domain name. So I can, white label it, and I can go directly. I can use it as just another website hosting service. So that's pretty cool. The other thing that you can do is you can connect it if you need a database or if you need something in the background to run that data for you, or to save stuff, or to run functions and connect with other APIs. They work with what's called Supabase, Supabase. And that's Supabase is a platform as a service, so to speak. But essentially, it kind of gives you a database, it gives you functions, it gives you all these different things that you can persist and create applications that can save data, they can work with other APIs, and so on and so forth. So pretty impressive. Now let me show you one more. So let's move through to another one. I'm going to go back to my dashboard, and I'm going to go to something that I built 8 days ago. And we were going back and forth in ideating on how we're going to do a new demo experience for our Bolt agents for Element. And one of the things that we wanted to do is say, hey, can we overlay this on top of the Element website, that demo experience, or should we just build a new application separately? Someone on the team, our CPO, Ty put together a script, or essentially a product write-up pitch for this. And it was just basically, most of it was text. And what we did is we just grabbed that text and massaged it a little bit. So we gave it to Lovable, and we said, build a landing page for demoing AI agents. Below is the copy. So we gave it all the copy that's part of that landing page, all the different sections and all of the different kind of areas. And then it built us a landing page with a full menu in here. And these are very interactive. So now you can kind of see how essentially we try to pick different personas. It built an actual form. It actually built the form where you use the right color, you use the orange, the element orange. It kind of used this really interesting live updating stats as part of the dashboard. It did voice validation with kind of quotes and everything. I mean, it really built this in about 5 minutes, going back and forth with it only once, actually.
In this example, what we're seeing is there is a clear idea of the pitch, the we want the experience to look like. But what we don't have are the web assets and basically the whole configuration of how this is going to move to a website. And it's an iterative process. It's going to look like. And this is the type of thing that, classically speaking, you're going to get wireframes or Figma. This is what it's going to look like in the website. 20 hours later, people give feedback, and 3 or 4 weeks later, code starts basically to touch that theory, basically graphical proposal, right? These now kind of got done all in once and you say in about 5 minutes, right? And it ends up with this type of prototype so that a web team can start actually bringing it home. Because obviously we didn't publish this.
No, exactly. This is more to think through, like, what's working, what's not working. So rather than somebody actually building and designing all this, you can just literally describe what you want and then have it come to life in not just in design, but also in code and interactivity as well. Because that's a big part of these experiences, that you need to feel, and there's interactions, and there's UI that's happening in here as well. All right, so let me show you one more, and then we can actually build one live if that's something that we want to do. But this one was this past weekend. We were sitting, with some of our friends, and they're McDonald's franchisees, and they have a store. And one of the things that they were discussing is this notion is like, hey, if I can only get my crew staff to give them additional bonuses and pays for individual tasks that they're doing. So if they go above and beyond, or there's a list of things that they just can pick up, and but there's really no way for me to kind of keep track of that. And how do I know if they've actually completed that particular task? So if there's just some system that we can, that exists, it would be really, really great to do that. And I'm like, okay, this sounds like a tool for we can vibe code this right now. And that they had never heard of vibe coding. So what we did is actually went through, and this one is a little bit more interesting because here's the prompt. I run a fast food McDonald's or restaurant, but in this case McDonald's, and pay my employees and managers hourly. I would like to build an app that tracks bonuses on top of the wage based on tasks they complete. I want to assign each employee tasks, and then each day after the task is done, they get allocated bonuses based on that task. Each task is verified based on taking a picture on the finished task. Build an app that can accomplish this for both managing tasks and completing tasks.
I like this very much, by the way. It's a great idea.
So we went through that, and what it did is actually it went through and kind of thought about what to build, and it said, oh, here's kind of what we're going to build. Here's the features: user authentication, the management dashboard, employee dashboard, task manager, bonus calculator. Also the colors. It's like you understood the McDonald's red and the yellow and the typography. And it's like, let's build it. So we went ahead and started building it. And then here's kind of what we got here on the right. So what's interesting about this, JC, is that you can see that there is multiple kind of applications, but this actually gives you a logging screen. So the first thing is like a logging screen, and you're faced with it's like, oh, here's a demo. It says use employee one or use manager in order to see what's going on. So in this case, we're going to use employee one.
That's incredible how he thought. Literally, where my head was like, how is it going to really authenticate? Did it connect to a database and where the? But it basically created is seeded a user, which is a common practice in software development. You have to seed certain users, and it thought that way.
Yeah. So then once you log in, you can actually see the tasks: employee here, hello, Sarah, employee. And then it has the demo data, assigned tasks, pending task completed, here's your bonus, and then to do in review completed. And then I can see a sample task in here. I can complete it, and what it does, it says take a photo. This is $5. You can take a photo, clean the dining area, take a photo, the clean dining area, and then it gives you the task description. So now you can either take a photo by using, and by the way, this is functional, right? So it's actually wants me to take a photo. Let's see if it actually works. It's using the camera API. It's incredible, right? So if I capture it, it completes that task for me, and I can see 2 tasks that are in review right now. So this is from the employee's perspective. And I can log out and then log in as the manager, and I can actually see it from a manager's perspective. It looks different. So I can now see the total tasks. I can see Sarah assigned multiple tasks. There are certain bonuses, and there we go. So you can see now, you can verify the task that was just completed, verify in a Word. So literally, it built this in 5 minutes, JC, and it is incredible. Like when you see this,
Is there something on the from the vibe coding point of view how you guys iterate? So you get something and then how you say improve it. Can you just give us a quick review of you got it, but was it perfect and how you iterated?
yeah, absolutely. So when you see here, you can see the first, it kind of build it, and it did the first thing, and then it said, "Hey, here's what I created." But when it ran it, there was a build error. So there was some kind of error, and I'm like, I have no idea what the hell this error means, and I'm like, I'm just going to ask it to fix it. So you just say fix it, for the code present, I get the following error, right? So you get this error. I clicked a button to say fix it, but it went through and said, okay, I'll fix this error for you. Let's analyze what happened here. So it went ahead and fixed that. And then there was an issue with one of the tools. It wasn't working. The verified task wasn't working. So I'm like, okay, I got another error. Let's fix that as well. And then it went ahead and fixed that as well. So we went just a couple iterations on fixing anything that was not running because it's like multiple files and so on and so forth. So you can, however, in Lovable, like in Lovable 2, what they've introduced is some really interesting things that you can attach, let's say, an image, and you can say, upload this or update this logo, for example, the top logo updated with this, or change this asset with this image or this photo. But then also you can actually, Lovable has introduced fine grain control, so you can kind of select different components as part of that UI and say, now change this component to something else, right? So in this case, let's see what it is. I can actually select, anything in here and I can live edit some of these things. So the tools are getting really good. It's not a matter of just vibe coding, just this one shot and building it, but now you have kind of a mix and match a little bit. So it's building the whole thing, but you get some control over changing individual components, which is nice. And that's the tools are getting to that point where they're coming back and saying, oh, wait a minute, we want to make sure that developers or people that are using this, they can see and they have the control to modify things and to use older workflows and even see the code underneath and what's happening. So you look at all the stuff that it built. Look at all the code that it built here.
It's incredible. It's a full project. Yeah,
it's a full project. Exactly.
Ardis is incredible, and again, it just demonstrates how this next version of AI supports ideation and removes the barriers of standing up projects and whatnot. Let's take this to our lovely domain of higher education, and what does it mean for higher education professionals, ed tech, and everyone in education to basically be benefiting from vibe coding. So the first thing I like to point out, for me, seen it, experienced it, I saw you experience this the same way, because we ran different teams and we come from this technical background. It was very common that we sponsor our projects, but there's a true non-computer science inclusion on registrar's offices, admissions, many faculty members who really need to develop interactive tools, and they are moving to web teams, and basically they are prioritized at the bottom of a log of ideas, and they never get the opportunity to build these things. So start thinking about rapid prototyping, an orientation sign up that needs to be done by career services, right? 1,000 students are being welcomed. So can we just do an advising chatbot that can be done over a weekend? One of the prompts that I've been using is like, can you basically fix errors that are always common in these workloads? So I know that an Excel report or a CVS report is always going to have these nulls, right? And you have like these 5 things. So basically you go and structure these data fixes, which we will call ETLs, right? So it's a really, really, really fast way to start addressing artists. These computer science meets the registrar's office, advisors, faculty, and with the pressures that we see on campuses with shrinking IT budgets and, web teams or other IT units just basically not be able to keep up with the needs of campus, is really, really exciting that I think the micro apps could have resurrection on campus. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I used to build a lot of those. I used to build this, basically they were prototypes. They were very simple and they did something very specific. And we're calling them internal admin apps, right? They were really doing something very simple. They were essentially, somebody was posting to a digital screen, for example, right? It was just calling, an API and posting something to a digital screen. So we had to build the interface for that so somebody can go into a website and then just upload something in there and build that. So that's something like those tools right now you can build with what we just showed today with Lovable. But what becomes really interesting is prototyping examples or showcasing in the classroom. If I remember, one of the things that I did a lot of slides to showcase different concepts in interaction design, in mobile application development, and even in kind of coding with different classes and so on and so forth. Now, that would have been very, very useful for me as I could have created mini applications to showcase all of those different things or different concepts in different contexts as well, and then provided that sample code or provided that to to the students, or they could have done the same thing on their own. I remember a lot of the assignments were around like create an application that essentially does something very, very simple like playing cards, right? Or with you, or something very simple like a chess, like a chess game and so on and so forth. So you had to build all those things, and the concept could have been so much nicer explained with these little mini apps.
How many of us build the common project of building the currency translator, right? A calculator. That was a classical JavaScript project in school and whatnot.
Oh, do you remember the time when everybody was building a tuition
Calculator. Yeah.
calculator?
Look, one of the hooks that I was thinking for this show today, it's real that, when the registrar builds a great appeal chatbot over lunch, right? Literally, this is the type of velocity and impact that we have on campus. Like everything technology, never perfect. Sometimes the aspirations way ahead of the realities of training and whatnot. So there's going to be risks when this starts basically being democratized. And to my example, when the registrar's office builds a chatbot for students to do a grade appeal, right? First thing that could happen, right, is some FERPA data privacy things could be exposed, right? And remembering that the sensitivity of IT and code and standards do exist for multiple reasons. And in a way, this puts pressure on that. Technical debt, it's real, right? So a software company like us, we have so many incredible things, but very often we need to come back and our software engineer teams need to come and do spring cleanup, or, we're going to do technical debt and pay our debt, right? This idea that you build this infrastructure and they are holes that need to be plugged, right? Campuses, Ardis, they're technology Frankenstein. So if anything, this just expands a bit more of that. So,
Oh no, we're gonna get more Frankensteins. The Frankenstein is gonna be even larger now. Is that what you're saying?
yes, and that's what happens here, right? So, how do you feel about privacy and potential exposures to now, because I can build software and also I'm going to throw this data that maybe I shouldn't be throwing at these services. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, if you're building production stuff, like if you're blind trusting the vibe generated code today, it's like it's a maintenance nightmare in 2026, right? So you're not going to be able to maintain that code. Of course, things are going to get better and better, but it's just it's not maintainable. So the security holes that you can potentially introduce are real. And one of the things that I think about, I'm like, like somebody can post a job posting tomorrow and say, wanted somebody who can vibe code and still pass a security audit. Can you imagine that, now having in job descriptions vibe coder as one of the requirements?
One of these taglines that is emerging, right? That the promise of Vive code today is the nightmare of maintenance of 2027, right? To your point, right? And
Yeah.
now a really interesting things in governance. Who owns these snippets, right? So all of a sudden, if I drop this, so the registrar's office is responsible for the upkeep of these and how they're interconnected. It also starts making the universities rethink if the registrar's office put together a incredible, that actually processes an audit chatbot for students to appeal grades. So do they own it, or does it go back to IT? And there's this aspect of, it was at a POV and now it moves to a roadmap of a technology development. I find it very interesting of how would it be to think about something that was successful, created via Vibe coding, but then who owns it after that? Assuming it didn't come from IT.
That's a really interesting one because it's only been just a couple of months. We still haven't seen the effects of software that's getting built, a lot of software that's getting built, and the maintenance cycles for that software. So my intuition is that because software is going to be very, very easy to get written and rewritten, we really don't care about maintenance anymore, right? We can just ask to rebuild it and then it'll just rebuild it, or we can ask it to modify the functionality for something else and not even worry about the maintainability part of it. So it can become disposable software, so to speak.
One of my mental images that as an immigrant really shocked me, right, is the whatever is broken at home, a TV, a toaster, a cushion, a couch, right? It's cheaper to throw it away here in the States than to repair it, right? Where I come from, you know, like the refrigerator, you call, you know, it gets sent to the shop and it gets fixed, and a couch gets sent to, you know, a place and they sew it and they put a new fabric on it. So the maintenance aspect, artisanal or not, it's affordable and accessible. But here, what you're talking about is something that we've been seeing on consumable goods. Your point is so interesting that probably it's just around the corner when it comes to software, because the cost of maintenance is so high that it's cheaper, easier, and faster to produce new. That's a good one, Ardis. That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, a human, it's really hard for them to write, thousands or hundreds of thousands of lines of code. For an LLM or an AI, it can write that in just a minute or two.
The whole thing about when we think about coding and documentation, and for the idea that someone else is going to read my code, it's also a slowdown. And what is happening here is that all these things could be so fast that, yeah, maybe who cares? Fascinating. Anything else on risks? Because I think we're approaching the time for us to think about where does it go, what's the outcome, the outlook, and if you want to jump in, what are the 3 or 4 things that you need to be doing today to accelerate your Vibe coding, I guess, attempts? Anything else on risks that you want to mention?
No, not a lot of risks. I see a lot of opportunities with vibe coding. Besides the risk that we kind of mentioned is maintainability or plugging into some production data on systems right now. But if you're using it for ideation, concepting, and then if you're using some of the tools like we talked about, Lovable, that allow you to look underneath and to kind of start modifying things underneath, or bring in somebody who can kind of take it into production, and that's really really great. Vibing is actually it is entering our vocabulary, and it's not necessarily just coding, vibe coding, but now we have things like vibe marketing or vibe X, right? Vibe whatever function. So or vibe management. So all of these things where we're communicating with the LLMs, and then we're describing an output, and that LLM is able to give us that output. We talked around ChatGPT, like the O3 model, where it's able to generate and to think through images and to generate new images and ads and so on and so forth. Now, that's vibe marketing, if you think about it, if you want to use it for that. So this idea of Vibe X and is going to become more and more relevant as the capabilities of the models get better, and we start applying it to different domains. But as it pertains to vibe coding, I do have a couple of things that you should probably do, like just start playing around, start in a sandbox. I would say Lovable right now is probably one of the nicest interfaces and gives you a lot of flexibility to deploy something that's real, and don't point it to production data. So try not to do that right now. Just make sure that that's vetted and there's some kind of security pass. Lovable actually has introduced, and some of the other platforms have introduced the ability for them to scan your code now that's generated for security flaws. One of the things that you probably should do is there's have a human reviewer in there as well. That was interesting when you mentioned, JC, around Andrew Ng's micro course for staff orientation. That would be a really interesting one. He does a really good job at breaking down concepts, going a little bit more technical than not, but it would be interesting to, even for us to introduce it to some of our teams that are a little bit less technical, or they are not writing the code themselves, but they're tangential, so they can start building some of these components.
Yeah, so I guess our punchline is get started. There are formalized training. Probably Andrew's one of the most interesting one. But the way you should look at this is set the time, invest the time for this safe experimentation, right? On how would I do this? I have an idea. I've always had this idea, and I don't have a software team that can deploy it. Today, now, with this podcast, no longer is an excuse. It's really something that it's very accessible. It's free, and it starts basically unpacking what I call systems thinking. Today we can if you have system thinking, I want to do this and how to connect to that, and then I need a picture, and then it has to have the hourly rate and the incentives, the gamification, and that's how the McDonald's application that you showcased today emerges. So it's exciting, and I concur with what you said 5 minutes ago. For the risks that we see on here, the upside, the opportunities, it's a 10x, and no doubt that we all should be jumping on this.
All right, I think we went a little bit long today, but
it was the vibe. It was the vibe,
You're all about the vibes.
I know, right? That's one of the words I use a lot.
That's right. So I stole your word.
There you go. There you go. Carpathy stole my word. Super fun, my friend. Safe travels, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode. You want to sign us off?
Till next time, everybody. Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.